Welcome to It Starts With You, where we cut through the noise and get real about the behaviours that shape our lives, both personally and professionally. I'm Vic O'Farrell. Let's jump in because behaviours start with you. Welcome to another episode of It Starts With You, and I am joined today by the delightful Julie Masters, as I do with all my guests. Julie, would you like to introduce yourself, what it is that you do, and the impact that you have on this world?
Wow, that's a very big question to start with. My name is Julie Masters. I'm the CEO at Future Voices, which is an accelerator and a community for incredible thought leaders and experts and speakers in London. I also have a consultancy company called Influence Nation, where we work with CEOs and trailblazers around the world. My background is the speaking industry. My background is the speaking industry. So I co-founded a management agency called Ode Management, represented speakers, launched speakers, represented speakers, amplified, coached, advised speakers all over the world, Australia, USA for many, many, many years. And have a podcast called Inside Influence that we were just chatting about before. That's on iTunes and Spotify. And I also speak. So I can kind of through line and all of that is I talk at conferences all around the world on what it takes to be a voice of authority in your space, what it looks like to be a person of influence, to have expertise in a world that is now crowded out with digital
Mm.
noise, and how we can all own our voice and drive a conversation and have a huge amount of influence and impact with our ideas if we know how to package them and how to get them out there in the
Mm.
world. So that is me, nutshell moment.
Um, you're also a wife, a mother, and all of those great things
I
too.
am. It's interesting actually. I am. I have two small children. We live on a mountaintop in Spain, and that's really like I was just reflecting on that yesterday actually, as I was kind of walking through the mountain. And I was thinking, what a weird world. I go out there and I talk about kind of like influence and impact in the digital world and how it's changed and how what it used to mean to have influence. And I know you want to talk about that. What it used to mean to have influence was one thing. And now it means something very different. There are
Mm.
influencers and so I'm out here having those kind of big conversations, and then I come back to my mountaintop with the flamenco caves and there's no cars where I live, and so what an interesting juxtaposition it
Oh,
is.
I think that's wonderful, though. So, viewers, listeners, you may, if you've listened to lots of this before, and Julie, I live in an old farmhouse in the middle of the Sussex countryside with, zero around because it's lovely when you can go to a big city, do what we do, and then come and retreat back, which is what I like to do. So, let me come to that word influence because if you said to people now, oh, yeah, I'm someone with influence, I think the immediate thought is we go to influencer and we think of all those people who are TikTok, Instagram, all of those YouTubers, everything else. Oh, yeah, I'm an influencer. What does it mean to be an influencer? But you've used the word influence for an awfully long time, and it's in a completely different
Mm,
aspect of I don't want to be an influencer on social media to gain followers because I'm got a great lipstick or I know what to do. You're talking about people in the business world of a position where they can influence the outcome of their teams. So just tell a little bit more in detail of what does it mean to influence in the world of business?
yeah, I mean, we've used the term in the speaking industry, in the world of expertise. We've used the term influencer for a really long time, a really, really long time. And it has shifted. I think everybody who works in this space has seen it shift, especially over the past 10 years. Like the word influencer used to mean someone of influence, someone who's able to drive a conversation, someone who is able to attract people into a movement or into a vision. Someone who's able to get attention, turn it into engagement, and then most importantly, close that gap between engagement and people taking action. Now, the term influencer, it means something else. It's evolved. Nothing wrong with that. It's evolved to like, a Snapchat star or an Instagram icon. It means something very, very different. But what's fascinating, and just to speak to that for a second, I now tend to use the term trusted authority just because there's been this split and there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what influencer means anymore. And so I tend to talk about, what does it look like to be a trusted authority in your space? What does it look like to be the person that gets the lion's share of opportunities? What does it look like to become, and you've heard us in Future Voices community talking about, what does it look like to be a category of one in your space, where you are the go-to voice of authority in your space. So that's the languaging that has kind of evolved out of that word influencer. However, what I find fascinating about the influencer space still, and when I speak on stages, I spend a bit of time on this, which is the role of the human brand. And that is the through line between all of those things. Because what this kind of rise into the stratosphere of the influencers has done is it has meant that now the most powerful asset that you can own, whether you're a leader, a CEO, a founder, an expert, a thought leader, is your brand, is your personal brand. Because thanks to influencers, that is the thing that cuts through now.
Mm,
That is the only thing that cuts through the noise. And so, what it's done is it's kind of actually made it even easier to be a trusted authority, because now the human brand is the most powerful asset when it comes
mm,
to getting attention. It's the most powerful asset to getting anyone to buy or buy in. Um, I was just looking at some stats this morning, actually, in terms of, how much attention human brands get versus organizational brands, how much trust human brands have. I think human brands are at like 65% trust now. Organizational brands are at 35.
wow.
So, this kind of rise of the human brand,
Mm,
influencers can use it to sell lipsticks, but how do we use it as experts, as leaders, as founders,
yeah.
to bring attention and engagement into the things that we care about, want to make an impact on, or want to build?
Mm.
So I hope that that kind of helps in terms of the distinction.
Yeah, it definitely does because, like you say, influencers was as opposed to a voice of influence, and by using trusted authority, it's the difference between perhaps a Martin Luther King from the day before there were influencers because social media, to the modern day. Let's not even talk about that name, because this is not a political podcast. So
Yeah.
when you talk about being a thought leader, what do you see as the the ones that have true thought, are the true trusted authorities? What are the behaviours that they display? Because they're not, I wouldn't call it, let's say the name Trump. I know we've got lovers and haters. He's a Marmite, but that's definitely somebody with influence, somebody with voice. I particularly don't think that there's great behavior there. So what do you think of somebody, what would be the characteristics of somebody that is a as a real as is at the top of their game as a trusted authority?
I think, firstly, there are two different types of influence. And if we look at influence as driving behavior, let's just use the example of being a parent. There's two different ways to drive behavior, right? There's what I would call fear-based influence. And this is just for me, fear-based influence, which is fear, drama, and outrage. And without, going into any names or any kind of like sides of a divide, there's plenty of fear, drama, and outrage out there. We see it on the front cover of every newspaper. We see it all the way through the internet. We see it all the way through social media. Um, Fear, drama, and outrage is the fastest way to get people's attention. It's just how we're wired as human beings. It's the fastest way to get people's attention. And because of that, and because that's relatively widely known, then if you want to get people's attention, it's the easiest thing to do, to go to those things, to filter those things. I would argue that that's great short term. It's not so great long term, but it's great short term. And it also depends on who you want to be and what you want to represent in the world. For me, fear, drama, and outrage is nothing that I want to move towards. And I think, as the amazing Seth Godin would say, you're looking at a race to the bottom there. So, what does it look like if it's not that? I think is probably the crux of your question, because we can all do that. We can all do the stick, we can all do the fear. What does it look like when it's not that? And for me, what it looks like there is, do you have a clear vision, first of all? Oh, there's an amazing lady called Nancy Duarte in the US, and she talks about the promised land. Do you have a clear promised land that you're trying to get people to move from where they are to where they want to go? So, do you have a clear promised land in mind? We talk a lot, and you would have heard me talk a lot about kind of decoding the road. Like, have you walked this road before? If you have walked this road before, what are the markers? How can you tell people, look, there's going to be this, and then there's going to be this, and then there's going to be this, and you know what? I'm going to be right there, and we're going to make it through here, here, and here, so that people can clearly see the roadmap, and we call that decoding the road. Um, Storytelling, you know, how are you engaging people on an emotional level? Often, again, you look at that fear, drama, and outrage, that's engaging people at its basis, that's engaging people on an emotional level. And what tends to be, if we don't want to do that, we think we have to go factual. I'm just going to drown you with as much information as I can. I'm going to drown you with graphs. I'm going to drown you with bar charts. I'm going to I don't want to be that. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to drown you in information. And actually, we don't make our decisions logically, usually. We back them up logically, but we make them emotionally. And storytelling is the language of emotion. And so what stories are we telling about the change that we want to be made? What stories are we telling about this promised land? How are we telling those stories? Where are we telling those stories? And I think that a big one that gets missed also is being fluent in the questions of the people that you're trying to lead, or the people, or the conversation that you're trying to drive.
Let's hit pause for a second so I can tell you how I work with leaders and teams to turn behaviour into results. If your team's stuck in the same old patterns, it's not just a skill gap, it's a behaviours gap. My multitude of workshops break those patterns and build stronger, more productive teams. It starts with you, and together we'll make it happen.
What are the questions that people have about this road? What are the questions that people have about how to get there, what to avoid, why they should go, and regularly showing up and consistently providing answers to those questions. So for me, that those are the behaviors of a trusted authority. And those are the behaviors of somebody who's in it kind of for the long game.
Mhm.
And that's the difference between what I would call kind of fear-based influence and non-fear-based influence.
And I absolutely agree with you, especially when you talk about it's the quickest road to the bottom. The thing is, fear-based always sounds louder than trusted
Mm.
authority. So how can trusted authority get their voice heard louder than the fear-based? What's the
What
secret?
I'm seeing, you think that they're louder because you see more of it.
Yeah.
And the algorithm rewards it. And the more people are outraged, the more they, strike back, and then there's conversation, and it seems louder. What I'm really noticing is there's kind of like this quiet separation that's happening at the moment, where people who are interested in kind of long form discussion, more thoughtful, nuanced, intention driven discussion are actually separating out. And they are going to platforms where those conversations are being had. So podcasts are more popular than they have ever been. Long form newsletters are more popular than they have ever been. Platforms like Substack, more popular than they have ever been. Communities, groups, cohorts where people can get together and have nuanced conversations, more popular than they have ever been. And so I think, especially as AI is now coming to the picture, which is so fascinating from an influence and an expertise point of view, because how do you stand out as an expert when suddenly there's this new kind of kid on the block that's an expert in everything and can produce 10 times, 20 times, 100 times more content than you in under 10 seconds? Like, how do you compete against that? And that is where nuance and meaning and an overlay of experience comes in. And so I think we're seeing this division. I think that the platforms that are rewarding outrage and fear and drama at the moment, they are, they're creating more and more of that and more short form, soundbite, you know, kind of conversations. And there's this kind of splitting where those of us who are not interested in that, don't want to put our attention there, are backing away from those platforms and moving towards, you know, things like this podcast,
Mm.
where we can see different types of conversation happen.
Mm. Interesting that you talk about that split, and the fact that we all know if you start, the more you look at something on your phone, the more the algorithm feeds you that stuff, and therefore you end up in
Actually,
a spiral.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, which I thought was the best hack. She was saying we were talking about the spiral of the algorithm and how you start to notice, like you start to notice shifts in your mindset amplified back on social media.
Yeah.
So, if your mindset slips or something, like all of a sudden the algorithm just feeds it more and more and more. And she was saying when she starts to notice that slip, she'll start looking for something like knitting and it'll just reset her algorithm. And so that all she'll get is knitting. I just, that was the best.
I love that. I love that
Just
because
hack it.
yeah, but I think of the amount of people. So, everyone, I'm in Sussex, and I spend a lot of time getting trains into London. And the amount of times that I think to myself, how many people are sitting on this train? And I get it. Some people are reading books. We've changed from the print to the online. But I'm also looking and seeing the people doing, they're doing it because the finger movement just goes flickety, flickety, flick. And you think, you might have got on this train in a really calm and peaceful mood. Yet by the time you've got off, how much shit, it's my podcast, I shall swear, how much has shit has been fed to you that by the time you get off and get into your workplace, are you now changing the way that your mood is and your influence? You suddenly could become that, maybe a negative influence as opposed to a positive influence. And that's been changed because of social media, and you're not even aware of it.
I think that, talk about behaviors. I think taking personal responsibility, which is hard, right? In any area of our lives, it's hard because we're all tired and overwhelmed but taking personal responsibility for our attention because, our attention it is the currency. It is the new currency. It is the only currency that anyone cares about now. And so when you take responsibility for it and you go, where am I putting my attention right now? What is the impact of me putting my attention there? And what happens as a result of me putting my attention there? That is a constant reset. Like it's
Mm.
a constant reset. It's a reset I have to do constantly. I was listening to Brene Brown talk about it the other day in terms of transitioning between spaces, how we transition. And that's influence,
Yeah.
because I influence very differently when I'm showing up in a work capacity and I have a team to lead. I am showing up very differently at a very different speed with a very different intention, in a very different state than, 4 minutes later when I walk down these stairs and go and meet my kids.
Yeah.
Like I have to show up differently in those different spaces, and how we transition really makes a massive difference in terms of how we show up, the behaviors that we show in the next
Mm.
space. And, whether social media is the right place for you to go to do that transition in terms of showing up and influencing the way that you want to. I think that would depend on whether it's feeding you knitting or whether it's feeding you recipes or beautiful things, nourishing things.
I am going to start looking up cooking. So
You're going to hack your algorithm.
I'm hacking out the algorithm, yeah. But it is, I mean, even just talking, like you say, from being there, showing up as Julie Masters, CEO, or am I going to go downstairs and be mum to the kids? I think even so say if I'm spending a day in London with my husband, family, friends, there's this automatic reaction, or this automatic thing that everyone just looks at me as if I know where I'm going. And yeah, I probably do. But and then there'll be this like, okay, Vic, you're in London mode. I'm like, well, because you've put me in charge. I've gone very in charge, and I'm very right. Okay, come on, we're they're like, yeah, but we don't want to walk at the pace that you would walk around in London if you're working. And I'm like, the thing is, you're asking me to be in that space, And
Hmm.
now you're asking me to have a different behavior whilst I'm in that space. And I find it very difficult to, and it's bringing it from our subconscious mind to our conscious thought processing, because we do different
My
ways.
husband used to say to me, he used to have this saying where I'd come because, work on and off from home, and now I work totally from home unless I'm in London. And he's just like come down, and he'd be like, "Do you want to take your war face off?"
Your what face?
Your war face. Because I'd come down in like full warrior mode, be like, right, what's going on? What's happening with this? And that was fine when it was just the two of us, like before kids. That was fine because you come down and you could relax and you could. What I found really interesting now is you come down and, as you said, the situation requires warface in a way. It requires that, right, homework, bath, what's going on, but it requires doing it in a very, very different way. The momentum is the same, but the presence needs to be
Mm.
completely different. Otherwise, like having a family, any kind of relationship, I don't care who it's with, is the craziest mirror, right? It is like the best and the worst mirror. Because, if I go down and do it in a work way, you better watch people start melting down. Not because I'm being mean, but because they're just like, whereas if you go down and do it in a way that is required for family, that is far kind of like, okay, we're struggling with this. What's going on? Let's go sit down. Let's go, it's different. It's a different cadence. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit often for flipping between the two, trying to flip between the two.
And it's a skill. It is
Mm,
an absolute skill. And like you say, until somebody holds that mirror up and says, hold on a minute, Vic, can we just step out here? Because what happens is we end up just, it becomes conflict because I've said something. And rather than that person like stopping, taking a moment to just do that, reflect back, hold on a minute, is this what
mm,
you meant? Because that's how it came across, which would then stop me in my tracks and go, oh, do you know what? Sorry, I didn't mean it like
yeah.
that. Thank you for stopping me. And you can quite easily diffuse situations, but as humans, we just react, and we're not taking that moment to stop and think, okay, let me just get a little bit of a perspective. Where is Julie coming from when she's just said that to me? Because that's
Yeah.
not the Julie that I need now. So if I
Mm,
just tell Julie, just 2 seconds, and it's moments, really
it
small
is.
moments.
Oh, it's Mike. I had an example of it this morning. Had a launch that happened overnight out of Australia. And I woke up this morning and I'm packing lunches for children, got text messages from parents. I'm like trying to do feed the cat, I'm doing 100 things. And what I shouldn't have done is jumped onto my emails really quickly
Mm,
in the
yeah.
gap. But that is exactly what I did. And I noticed an error and I shot back, not in a horrible way, but I shot back quickly, like, have you picked up on this? Not with any of the kind of the awareness that I should have brought to the fact that people had just been working really hard on a big launch and put their all into it. And, they responded. After I dropped the kids off, I reflected and I sent them an email when I got back to the office this morning and I was like, I'm so sorry. You know what? I should know better. I should know better. Can we start this again? How about thank you? Awesome job on the launch. Really appreciate everything that you've put into it because when we lose awareness, which we all do, when we lose that awareness piece, that's when we start almost like leaking the energy of where we are now, where we've just been,
Yeah.
onto everybody around us.
Yeah. And it is that, like you say, suddenly you just, checked in on an email because, our phones are with us all the time. It's so easy to check in with stuff that me and my husband have a rule that, I mean, we do take our phones to bed because it's my alarm, but it goes to sleep mode at 9:15, so I can't get disturbed by any notifications. And I do turn it off in the morning because I have the Tweety Bird alarm as well, by the way, people. Change your alarm to something really calm to wake you up with.
Oh, I love that one.
But I noticed that immediately, and it just became a habit and a reaction. You turn your alarm off, you open your phone. It's like, absolutely not. Until I am up and out and dressed and down here in the office, I don't open those emails because and I've done it before where I've noticed that I'm in bed, and it might even be at a weekend when someone's emailed overnight. Like you say, you're just having a cup of tea, and then suddenly someone's response has changed my impact, and therefore
Mm,
I'm now changing my reactions. So it's a no. I think we need to put phones, social media, emails. We just need to put all of that back where it sits
mm.
because even in the world of AI, it's crept in without
Mm.
us realizing that it's now here.
I mean, I'm so hardcore with it. Like I think probably working in the world that I work in, which is the world of attention and the ownership of attention and yeah, attention and intention. And I've always been really hardcore with my phone, as in it's always on silent, to the absolute disgust of all of my friends. It's been on silent for a decade. There are no notifications. There's nothing that flashes up on my screen unless
Wow.
it's from certain people who, if they flash up on my screen, I want to know, such as my husband, my parents, my kids. Um, Always on silent, all notifications turned off. It stays downstairs. It never comes into the bedroom with me. It's my iPad. I'll read on my iPad upstairs. So I'm really hardcore with it,
Mm.
and still, I pop into the kitchen when I'm halfway through a conversation and I pick up my phone and I'm just quickly checking my emails. And even while I'm doing it, I'm thinking, I'm halfway through a conversation with someone in the laundry. What on earth am I doing?
Yeah.
And it's like my thumbs have a life of their own.
Yeah.
And so, even with all of that, it's so easy to do. Um, and I definitely, even with all of that, can do it an awful lot better than I
Yeah.
currently.
And let's think about the fact that this is you and me talking who work in this world and talk in this world and have so much expertise in this world. The people out there that maybe are listening to this or watching this that have don't have that self-awareness of their own behaviors and their influence on others. What would you say as we kind of wrap this up? If you could give the viewers, listeners, like a top tip, maybe one or maybe even two, to become that trusted authority with just something really simple in terms of whether it's their use on social media or something, but what's a real quick win to become a trusted
Mm.
authority?
Look, there's three kind of types of influence in my experience. There's internal influence, how we influence ourselves. There's external influence, which is interpersonal influence, how we influence other people. And then there's influence at scale, like the big influence we want to have in the world, the messages we want to drive, the conversations we want to drive, how we want to change the world for the better. For me, it always starts with inside because, unless you're getting a handle on that, the rest is just how you get amplified in the world. So I think the first one would be just checking in with yourself, as in what state am I in right now? What state am I in and what state do I want to be in? And trying to make that adjustment. And sometimes that adjustment is so easy if we can catch it. Sometimes for me, it's just listening to a song, a particular song, or I have a poem. You can't see it, but it's just here on my desk. It's underneath the glass of my desk. And I never get it. I never say it right. Desiderata. And I'll just stop and just read it and try and reset my state. So, what state are you in? What state do you want to be in? What's a quick reset you can do? And the second one, and this one is really powerful, is stating your intention before you start a conversation, especially critical conversations, especially hard conversations, even like with your family. As soon as you state an intention, intentions cut stories. So, if you and I are about to have a hard conversation, or, as you said, someone's about to go, hey, do you want to just stop? Um, Setting your intention first is one of the most powerful things you can do. Hey, my intention is to have the best possible conversation with you right now. So I'm here, I'm gonna listen, and you let me know what you need from me. Or my intention is for us to find an outcome where we can work together because I think that we've got such incredible strengths when we bring them together. So setting intention, I have seen that hack cut more conflict, potential conflict, than any other. Because we all walk around with these little stories, right, about where people are coming from and, what it means. And if we can set our intention at the beginnings of something,
Mm,
it cuts everything else.
mm.
And yeah, that's a really, really powerful one.
Thank you. And that kind of, I love the when you started that bit, the first bit of the internal influence. I'm like, and that's why I called this podcast. It starts with you
Mhm.
because we can't change other people's emotions, influence, behaviors until we look in the mirror and understand the ripple effects that we have on the world.
Mhm. Yeah.
Julie, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. For those of you that want to get in contact with Julie, please look in the show notes because all of Julie's contact details, social medias, LinkedIn, websites, everywhere Julie wants you to find you, Julie wants you to find her. Yeah, you know what I mean. You know what I
That's what
mean.
you
I
said.
get in the words. It's in the show notes, people. Thank you, Julie, for being on here. It's been a pleasure to
Thank
talk to you.
you. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to have the conversation.
Well, that's today's dose of truth. Now go make it happen because behaviour drives behaviour, and behaviour starts with you.